say, first off, I love what I do. I love what I do for a living. I believe that, when I got into the ministry, I knew that I wanted to do it. I felt that God had called me to it. I also felt like God had gifted me for being in the ministry. In fact, it's hard to believe. Think about this. Do you realize next month it will have been 12 years since we came to Elk City? Long time. But I say that and just, as much as I love what I do, it's not always easy. And there are times when maybe I kind of wondered why I did it. Many of you know, kind of know some of our story. We came in January 2008 is when we came to Elk City and to Antioch. In 2013, we left and went to Clinton, where I was the lead pastor at First Christian there. And I say that because during that time, there was a while when and I say our, I think me and Tammy's experience both could be summed up in one word, and that was miserable. And I'm not, it's not here to go into a whole bunch of details or anything else, but I need to say that for a while that was the darkest time that I've ever had in ministry. Professionally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, crushing. There were times when I wondered why I was still doing it. And I will also say, though, that, I knew when I went over there would be battles. I knew that there would be, opportunities, that there would be things that would arise. But I think in my naivety, I was convinced that, God was on my side and I was going to rock the world for Jesus. And it wasn't always that easy. And it was some rough time. And I look back, and I think that I have to call it a valley. There was times I wondered if I'd made a huge wrong turn. And when I say that, please understand, I'm not saying that I made a wrong turn in the fact of going to Clinton. I mean a wrong turn of ever getting into the ministry in the first place. There were times I questioned that. And I just say that because I think that probably at one time or another we've all been there in some way. We've all been in those times where we find ourselves in a valley. Maybe you're in one now. I don't know. I will say this. If you've never found yourself walking through a valley in life, you still need to listen to the message because you will. We all do. Some of us have been there many times, and some of us are there now. And, I get to thinking about this as we're going through our dumb things that smart Christians believe. And I feel like one of them that many smart, well-intentioned Christians believe is that a valley means a wrong turn. Okay? And so that was why we're addressing this, because, but now I want to kind of set a little bit of the ground rules, or not ground rules, but lay a little bit of foundation here. Why do we call it a valley, when we talk about this? Valleys are what? They're low points, low places in our lives. Now you may wonder where in the world we got the idea of calling it a valley. And I think it is a valley because we've all heard the phrase of having the mountaintop experience or made it to the mountaintop, or whatever it is, okay? And so it seems that obviously the opposite of the mountaintop would be what? The low places that are in between the mountaintop and the mountaintop experiences. So that's why we call them a valley. And but why do we think that, we get this phrase that a valley means a wrong turn? And here's where I think we get this, because it's kind of a, A plus B equals C, and A plus C equals B, so therefore B equals C. That's your math for the day. Am I right, Julie? Thank you. I get worried sometimes. No, I think what it boils down to when we say this is that in our minds, okay, a valley is a negative, okay? And we know that negative equals bad, and And so if negative equals bad, then a valley is bad, right? And so therefore, if a valley is bad, then that means it must be the result of a wrong turn, of a mistake, of something else. And so we buy into this. If we ever go through life, if we ever go through a valley at any time, then it is obviously the result of a wrong turn. And so, I think that it's especially true if we find ourselves in a valley that we can't find the end of. One of them that seems to have no end in sight, that we don't think is ever going to end. And the reason we know that is because God only leads us to the mountaintop, right? Sorry. If that's what you believe, then we need to have another discussion another time, because that's not the case. Okay? And I think it's one of the reasons that this belief can be so detrimental to not only, I think it's detrimental to our churches, it is detrimental in our communities, and it can also have a huge impact on our personal faith as well. And so, first question is a valley, okay, is the valley the result of a wrong turn? Sometimes. That's just what you wanted to hear, wasn't it? You're like, you're supposed to tell me no. Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. Sometimes the valleys that we find ourselves in are the result of a wrong turn. And so the first thing we've got to do, I think, to deal with that is start to ask the question. One of the first questions is, how did I end up in this valley? Keep in mind, though, no two valleys look the same. Okay? No two valleys are the same. There are some that, some are short, some are long. Sometimes valleys are caused by, they're self-inflicted. There are other times that we have no clue. So there's different types of valleys that we find ourselves in. And so, we have to start kind of asking the question, first and foremost, of how did I get here? And when we do, I think there's three things that we need to keep in mind. There are three options of how did I end up in this valley. The first is God sent me here. Okay? Oh, we don't like to hear that one. But it's true. All you got to do is look at Exodus. Look at Exodus. There's other times too, but you go to Exodus chapter 14. And what do you find? You find the Israelites go out of Egypt, and after they get out of Egypt, then God tells Moses to take the people and to turn around and to camp in a place that is not strategically sound, considering that they just fled from slavery. Okay? And so he tells them to stop there. Then God hardens Pharaoh's heart, which leads Pharaoh to do what? He goes out and goes after the Israelites. And so he's going out, and they find themselves now, they are trapped between the sea, the wilderness, and a bloodthirsty Pharaoh. Which causes them to do what? They turn on Moses. They turn on Moses and they say, what'd you do? You brought us out here. There's not enough graves in Egypt, so you bring us out here to be killed. And so, excuse me, what we find, though, is that in that time, and here's the difference, is that you and I look at this, and in hindsight, what do we know? Because we all learned it. And that is that the will of God will never lead you where the grace of God cannot keep you. Right? And we've all heard that time and time again. And we know this from the Israelites going out, that the will of God will never lead you where the grace of God cannot keep you. But see, they didn't know that right then. What they knew is they were in a bad spot. And Pharaoh was breathing down their necks. But what you and I also know is that it was because of that valley that they found themselves in that the parting of the Red Sea was possible and necessary. And the fact is that sometimes the valleys that we find ourselves in are because God sent us there. The other is that sometimes we find valleys because we messed up. Because we made a mistake. Sometimes it's something big. Sometimes it's something small. Sometimes it's something, seemingly insignificant. We can find ourselves in a valley because we picked up something that we shouldn't have picked up. We can find ourselves in a valley because we did or we said something that we shouldn't have said. It's not always anything that's really big. The Israelites, another good example. talking about them messing up and finding themselves in a valley, they would not break away from a lifestyle of idolatry. And as a result, they found themselves exiled and being dominated by enemy nations for hundreds of years. Okay? So the valley that they found themselves in, was because they messed up. But I want to say this, not always does it have to be a sin issue. Sometimes we think that when we say I messed up that it's always a sin issue. No, sometimes it's not. Sometimes the mess up is that, like I said, we bought something we shouldn't have bought. We said something to somebody that we really shouldn't have said. We picked the wrong side of a disagreement, or we allow a family issue to go too long without dealing with it. It's not always that it is a sin issue. But the fact is that many times the valleys that we find ourselves walking through are caused by us. They're there because we messed up in one way or another. So how do we get here? Because God sent me? Because I messed up? The other can be, who knows? Who knows? Read Job. Read the book of Job. Job is a good man, a righteous man. I mean, life is humming along, and then suddenly Job has what appears to everybody else a very bad day. I mean, he lost everything. He lost his wealth, he lost his cattle, he lost his children. And then, as if that's not bad enough, then he is afflicted with sores, boils, painful sores from the top of his head to the bottoms of his feet. And through all of it, Job didn't get it. Job's wife didn't get it. The book of Job is his friends who came to visit him, and based upon what they said, they didn't get it either. But what we know is that at the end, God shows up. Okay? And he brings Job out of the valley. But you know something very interesting? Did you notice God never told Job why he was in that valley? He never told him why that stuff happened. The only reason that you and I know why the events of Job happened is because we get to see behind the curtain. Okay? Because it is recorded in the beginning of the book for us of why Job endured all of that. But he never knew it. Okay? And there are times when we're going to go through, valleys. We're going to go through things, and we don't know why. We don't know why. But that's what we need to trust. Because there are things that we're going to go through that there are no answers to. We're going to find ourselves in valleys, maybe short, maybe long. But the fact is that in those times, when there are no answers, we need to trust that the God who knows all the answers knows exactly what's going on. So, if we know that valleys can happen, for three different reasons, either God sent me here, I messed up, or it's something bigger than me. I think the other thing that we need to, the next logical question is to ask how we should respond whenever we find ourselves in these valleys. We've all heard of a knee-jerk reaction. Knee-jerk reaction is when something happens and suddenly you just, and you react. Don't think. Okay? You don't give it any thought. You don't consider ramifications. You just act. Okay? And when it's on America's Funniest Home Videos and, some little kid punches his dad in the face, because he was playing peekaboo. It's funny to see a knee-jerk reaction, but most of the time our knee-jerk reactions are not the best reactions. Okay? And so I want to give you a few things here that we need to consider when we find ourselves in these valleys, how we should respond to them. And one of the things that you need to remember is the enemy will always, 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 always offer a shortcut. When you find yourself in a valley, the enemy will always offer you a shortcut to get out of it. He did it to Jesus. He showed up and he tempted Jesus by what? Offering a shortcut to get out of the temptation of what he was going through. And the thing is that it almost, it was somewhat biblical. It definitely appealed to Jesus' mortal flesh, but it was not what God wanted. And so you're always going to find that whenever you find yourself in a valley, the enemy will. He's going to offer you a shortcut. He will always offer a shortcut. I was thinking back during my valley, time in Clinton. The shortcut was to fight fire with fire. Play the game. But it would have never accomplished what I felt God wanted accomplished. And all that does is creates more division and more strife and more anger and more frustration and issues. And it does absolutely no good. And so, sometimes we have to sit back and understand that, yes, there's a shortcut here, and this may get us out, but that's not the right way. But we tend to take that shortcut when we don't think about it, when we don't analyze, when we don't even consider the fact that, what's the old, discernment is to discover what's a spirit, what's from Satan, and what's from self. And a lot of times we don't take time to discern that and figure out where these ideas, where these thoughts, where these reactions are coming from. The second, and sometimes, as we know, some of our valleys are self-made. And in those cases, we need to accept the consequences. Hebrews 12, the writer says this. It says, "My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, and he punishes everyone he accepts as a son. Endure hardship as discipline." God is treating you as sons. For what son is not disciplined by his father? And I know, discipline is not one of those things that we look forward to. It is not something that we enjoy. It's not something we love. But the truth is that our Heavenly Father does discipline. But if there was never any consequences to our actions, then how would we ever know that we were doing wrong? We wouldn't. Okay? And so, excuse me. But here's the key. There's a big difference between discipline and punishing. Okay? And I know we use that word sometimes, that we punish our children, but let's be honest, there's a difference between discipline and punishment. Punishment is about inflicting pain. It is about inflicting injury. Okay? Discipline is what? Discipline is about correcting. Discipline is about training. Discipline is about teaching. We all have with our kids. And I hope and pray. When you discipline your kids, it is done out of love and concern for them, not out of the need to inflict pain on them. Okay? Because that's the difference. One is the way that our Heavenly Father treats us, and that is to discipline us knowing that we have made wrong choices, and He's trying to correct us. He's trying to rebuke us. He is trying to draw us back. But it is done out of love for us. It is done out of our best interest. And so, when we find ourselves in these self-inflicted valleys, one of the first steps we need to do is accept the consequences. Okay? And that, once again, not easy. We don't like that. But the fact is that if we put ourselves in that spot, that's what we need to do. The third one is don't run. A lot of times we find ourselves in a valley that we're in. We don't know where it's leading us. But I will tell you this. If you feel like it is a God-given task, don't run. And if you don't believe me, just ask Jonah. He was given a God-given task. He didn't want to do it. He ran. What happened? He ended up in the belly of a great fish and got thrown up. Okay? There will be difficult times, and there will be valleys that God will call us to walk through, whether we're doing tasks for whatever reason. Don't run from them, because the fact is that even though it may not feel like it at the time, what we do know is that God is God. God is good, and God is in control. And if He sees that you can benefit, that you can grow from walking through a valley, then we should commit to it. We should commit to that valley knowing that God's in it when we feel that He is. So, but there's a couple of standards, and I know this is kind of how we do. You talk about, remember that the enemy will offer a shortcut, not running, accepting the consequences. As Christians, when we go through valleys, when we go through valleys, we are called to a different standard. Plain and simple. Okay? Whether it is self-made, whether it is God sent me there, whether it, as I messed up, whatever it is, we are held to or we should be held to a different standard. We should hold ourselves to that. And so I'm going to go through quick things. Number one, do the right thing. When you find yourself in a valley, do the right thing. It is very tempting to color outside the lines. It is very tempting to try and do things that will benefit us, or do things in a way that will benefit us in the middle of it, but we can't. Whether we're on the mountaintop or whether we are in the valley, as Christians, we are called to do what? To do the right thing. The second is, tell the truth. Even when it ain't easy. Even when it ain't easy. Even when bending the truth, telling a lie, whatever, would maybe alleviate the situation. It would alleviate your pain, your suffering, get you out. As Christians, honesty is not only the best policy, it's the only policy. As Christians, we need to tell the truth. That's what we are held to. Number 3, keep commitments. One of our first responses whenever valleys begin is to retreat into ourselves. We do it all the time. Okay? We hit a tough patch and we retreat into our own selves. And the fact is that we need to, in these times as Christians, we are called to keep our commitments. It may be rough, but your family still needs you. You may be going through difficult times, but your church family, your friends need you, your work needs you. Keep your commitments. Okay? The fourth one is that we as Christians are to have concern for others. I'm going to break some news to you in case you didn't know. There's not a single one of us that lives in a bubble, that lives in a vacuum. Okay? Your actions impact others. That's the way it is. Okay? There's not a single one of us. When we go through valleys, what we need to be reminded of is the fact that have concern for others. Because the fact is that the way we act, the way we respond, the things that we say, the things that we do have an impact and an influence on others. I mean, it's the way that it is. Okay? And then finally, but definitely, not last, not least, we need to have concern for God's reputation. Yeah. I know somebody's thinking, hold on, I can damage God's reputation. No. God is God. Okay? We are not in charge of His reputation. But what you can do is you can damage His reputation in the eyes of others who are not Christians, and those that look. How many times do you hear people ranting and raving about Christians, about pastors, about the way that they dealt with something, handled something, and what does it always say? Oh, I could never serve a God who would allow that, who would do this, who would. Okay? No, you're not knocking God down a peg. But what you are doing is you are damaging His reputation in the eyes that He is trying to reach. Why? Because of your actions. Because of your words. Because of the way that you responded to the valley in your life. So, that's as Christians what we need to be reminded. Philippians 1:27 says this: whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel. You notice he doesn't say whatever good happens, or whenever good happens. Whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel. As Christians, we are called to live a life that is representative of the gospel of Jesus Christ. which means that in good times, in bad times, mountaintop, valleys, doesn't matter. We should live a life worthy, a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ. And one of the reasons it's so important to understand that valleys are not the result always of a wrong turn every time is because, we talked about this when we did the plan and blueprint discussion. If a valley always means a wrong turn, are we ever going to step out in faith? No, we don't step out in faith, and we're given the opportunity to. Because what if it's the wrong turn? I'm going to end up in another valley. Okay? So I think that's the first one. But the second one is that when we begin to see valleys as the result of a wrong turn, we view it from that perspective, we also miss the opportunity to see God work through those situations and through those consequences and through those valleys to bring about whether it is redemption, whether it is strengthening of our faith. I mean, there's so much that happens when you're talking about the valleys that we go through. I believe that one of the first things that we do is that whenever we go through valleys, we are strengthened. Wayne, back there now, Wayne wrote a poem, and there's one of them that's in your bulletin. We typed it up, but there was another one called Mountaintops. Just great. I was going to put it in there, but it's a little too long. But the last stanza of it says this. He says, mountaintops are beautiful, but you must beware. As beautiful as they are, nothing grows there. The fact is that it's in the valleys of our life that we grow. It's during those difficult times is where we grow. So James said this in chapter 1, verse 2 through 4. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. And it's interesting when James says that, when he's talking about trials, number one, he's talking about present actions and going through them, but also he says many. Not whenever you go through any trial, but whenever you go through trials of many kinds, consider it pure joy. Anybody ever here, you've been in sports like you ran distance, you try to develop endurance, don't you? Okay. Does that happen after one exercise routine? No, you have to do it again and again and again, and each time you get pushed a little further and you develop endurance. It's the same way with spiritual growth. It's the same way with spiritual endurance. It's not going to happen because you went through one valley and you're like, whoo, that was a rough week, but I'm glad I'm good now. I mean, I'm just like super Christian because I had a rough day. You guys don't speak sarcasm real well, do you? You just made it. The fact is that, we grow. Well, I look back at the time that we were in Clinton, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the way I do ministry. I learned a lot about things that are important. I learned a lot about the way that I respond in certain situations. I'll be honest. I also learned that there's some things I will have no reason. I have no clue why they happened. And I got to be good with that. I mean, there's some stuff that you'd say, what did you learn? Nothing. It was just bad. But the thing is, I think what I have learned, though, is that there will be times I'm going to go through valleys. Some of them are going to be caused by me, some are not. Some are going to be my fault, some are going to be the fault of others. There are going to be times when I'm going to learn something from it, and there's going to be other times when I'm going to walk through it, and when it's done, I have no clue. It is above my pay grade, and I can't find a reason for it. And I've got to be good with that. Because that's what faith is about. Is being able to walk through that. We sit here and talk about valleys and everything else. The Apostle Paul. Okay, we know about the Apostle Paul. He said that he had a thorn in his flesh, an affliction. We would call that a valley. Okay? He prayed 3 times for God to take it away. What was the response? Jesus said in 2 Corinthians 12:9, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. In other words, no. No. But here's Paul's response. He continues on and he says, therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. Read that again. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. It's kind of a hard one to swallow sometimes, isn't it? But you know why he did? Because God's grace is sufficient. Because his power is made perfect in weakness. And that's why Paul ends and he says, for when I am weak, then I am strong. You remember the old children's song? I am weak, he is strong. The fact is that if we don't walk through valleys, we will never see God work in amazing ways. If we don't go through those things, we will never grow. We will never learn. We will never be more like Christ. And that's the goal of every believer, is to be more like Jesus. But it's not going to happen if all we do is sit on the mountaintop. If we find inner peace and inner harmony and we're good and everything's wonderful. No, that's not what it is. We grow when we are forced to go through things we didn't want to go through. We grow when we have to endure hardship and trials and issues. We grow when we go through valleys of life. And when we do, and when we trust God, and we're willing to do the things that we talked about, to understand, you know what? God may have sent me here. Or when this is my fault, I need to accept the consequences of it and address it. When we stay true to God's word and the standards that are set forward as Christians, then we come out in every valley that we come out of. We emerge a little bit stronger. We emerge knowing a little bit more. We emerge with the ability to lead the next generation. So consider it pure joy whenever you face valleys of any kind, and of many kinds, knowing God's using it to develop endurance and perseverance, so that, number one, he says, so that we would be complete, not lacking anything. When you're going through valleys, God's not doing it to punish you. He's doing it so that you might be complete. When you're walking through dark times, it's not so that he can smack you down and make you miserable. It's so that you can be complete and mature and not lacking anything. And consider this. If God would ask his one and only son to walk through the valley that led to the cross of Calvary, why do we suppose that as adopted sons and daughters, we would not be asked to go through some valleys of our own? But here's the good news. We always save the good news for last. Okay? The good news is that as followers of Christ, as disciples of Jesus, as Christians, we never walk through the valleys alone. He goes with us everywhere. He gives us the strength to go through those valleys as well. Now, if you're here today and you're not a Christian, you're not a believer, you are walking the valleys of life on your own. But the fact is, you don't have to. Because the invitation to you is the same that it was to any of us that were once not believers either. And that is to come to him and to let him lead you through the valleys, to give you the grace that you need, the ability to do what needs to be done in the moment, for the moment, to come out the other side stronger and better than when you went in. I'm going to ask you to stand. We're going to have our time of decision. We're going to have our prayer rooms open. I would invite you, if you need prayer, somebody to pray with you, somebody to pray with you, please just step into one of those rooms. You don't have to say a thing. Maybe you have a decision to make. And if you do, I invite you to make it now.